What if the past you thought was buried forever suddenly returned to life? What if the person you cried for, the person you let go of, walked back into your world without warning? Sometimes the heart is not ready for the truth. Sometimes the truth feels like a dream that refuses to fade. This is the moment Amy never imagined, the moment that turns her whole world upside down. Amy had spent years learning to live with the silence of loss. The ranch was her home, her place of healing. No matter how many horses she trained or how much comfort she gave to others, there was always an empty chair at the table, a missing hand she used to hold, a voice that had once made everything feel safe. Ty Borden had been more than just her partner. He was her anchor, the man who carried both strength and gentleness in equal measure. His absence had shaped Amy in ways no one could see. She raised her daughter. She kept the ranch alive. She smiled when she had to, but behind that smile was a quiet ache that never left. Life at Heartland carried on as if nothing had changed. Seasons passed, winters came and went, summers filled the air with warmth, and still Amy carried her loss like a shadow. People said she was strong, but Amy knew strength often meant hiding your pain so others could feel secure. Jack watched over her like he always did. Lou tried to keep her busy, and Lindy gave her reason to keep moving forward. Yet late at night, when the house grew silent and the lights faded, Amy often sat awake, remembering Ty's laugh, the way his hand felt in hers, and the promise of a life they had dreamed of but never finished. It wasn't easy for her to accept that fate had written a story she could not change. Every corner of the ranch reminded her of him, the barn where they had argued and made up, the fields where they rode side by side, the fences they had built together. All of it seemed frozen in time, waiting for a moment that would never come. She told herself she had moved on. But deep down her heart still carried his name. Heartland itself was a witness to Amy's resilience. The land had seen joys and sorrows, beginnings and endings, and it gave her comfort to know that even though Ty was gone, the earth they both loved still carried his spirit. Friends came and went, new challenges arose, and Amy faced them with quiet determination. Yet no matter how much life demanded of her, there was always that unspoken truth: Ty's absence was one wound that never healed. She had convinced herself the story was complete, that the chapter had closed forever. But the heart has a way of refusing to let go, and destiny often finds a way to return what we thought was lost. And just as Amy had begun to believe she truly understood life without him, the impossible happened. The morning had started like any other at Heartland. The sun rose slowly over the hills, painting the sky with streaks of gold and soft pink, and the ranch breathed with the rhythm of another ordinary day. Amy moved through the barn with practiced ease, brushing down a restless horse and murmuring calm words as she worked. There was peace in these simple tasks, a comfort she had grown to rely on. Yet beneath that quiet routine she carried the same heavy truth she always had: Ty was gone, and no amount of sunlight could chase away that shadow. She led the horse out into the corral, her boots crunching against the gravel, when something shifted in the air. It was nothing she could put into words, just a sudden stillness, like the land itself was holding its breath. Amy paused, hand resting gently on the horse's mane, and looked out toward the long stretch of road that curved toward the ranch. At first it was only a figure in the distance, blurred by the early morning light. But as the seconds passed, the shape became clearer. Each step carried it closer to her, and her heart began to pound in her chest with a wild, desperate rhythm she hadn't felt in years. She blinked once, twice, convinced her mind was playing tricks on her. But the figure didn't fade. It grew sharper, more real, until she could see broad shoulders, a familiar stride, the way sunlight caught his hair. Her breath caught in her throat. For the first time in so long Amy felt the earth tilt beneath her feet. "No," she whispered, voice trembling. "This can't be real." But it was. Standing only yards away now was the man she had lost, Ty Borden, alive and breathing, his eyes locked with hers. In that instant the world seemed to collapse into silence. The birds stopped singing. The wind refused to move. Even the horse at her side stood frozen, as if every living thing knew the weight of that moment. Amy's knees went weak and her hands trembled as she reached out without even realizing it. She wanted to run to him, to throw her arms around him and never let go. But another part of her held back, afraid that if she touched him he might vanish like a dream. Her mind spun with questions she couldn't form into words. How? Why? Where had he been? Was this really him? Ty stood still, his face carrying the weight of years and travel, eyes filled with something deeper than words could explain. He didn't rush forward to break the silence, he simply stood there, waiting, almost as if he knew Amy needed this moment to believe. Her chest tightened as memories crashed over her like waves, the night she cried for him, the morning she woke with an emptiness she could never fill, the years she told herself she had to be strong for Lindy. All of it clashed with the sight of him standing alive before her. 1,000 emotions twisted together, joy so sharp it felt like pain, fear that this was a cruel trick, anger that he had left her, and relief so powerful it nearly brought her to her knees. Tears burned her eyes as she whispered his name, voice breaking. Ty. Ty's lips parted, and though no words came immediately, his gaze softened as if he had been waiting for this moment as long as she had. The silence between them was full of everything they could not say, longing, regret, hope. The world no longer made sense. The man she had buried in her heart had come back, and nothing in her life could ever be the same. Amy's breath trembled as she stared at him, mind spinning. Every second stretched into an eternity. It was him. His presence was undeniable, his eyes the same shade she had memorized, his posture carrying that quiet strength she had leaned on for years. Yet the weight of his return did not bring instant peace. It tore open every wound she had carefully stitched shut. Her first instinct was to run into his arms, to feel the warmth of the man she had longed for. But another storm rose inside her, anger, confusion, fear. How could he be here? How could he have allowed her to suffer all this time? The ache of his absence had shaped every part of her life, now his sudden reappearance felt like a cruel twist of fate. Tears streamed down Amy's face as she stepped forward, her voice shaking with both love and fury. Do you know what you've done to me, to Lindy, to all of us? The words burst out raw and sharp, echoing across the quiet ranch. Her daughter had grown up without a father, believing he was gone forever, and Amy had carried the crushing weight of being both mother and father, protector and nurturer. She had rebuilt herself from the ashes of grief, and now he stood before her as if none of it had happened. Ty's face tightened with pain, but he did not look away. He seemed older, weathered by secrets, his silence heavy with things unspoken. His eyes glistened, yet he stayed still, letting her words cut through the space between them. It was as though he knew she needed to release years of hurt before anything else could exist. Amy's voice broke as she continued, softer now but no less powerful. I cried for you every night. I begged for answers. I tried to be strong for Lindy, but inside I was breaking. Do you understand? You were everything, Ty. And then you were gone. Her hand shook at her sides, torn between reaching for him and pushing him away. The silence stretched, heavy with the history they shared, until finally Ty stepped closer. His voice was low and rough with emotion, as if speaking after so many years was almost too much. Amy, he said, I never wanted to leave you. Not like that. The words were few, but they carried a weight that pierced straight through her anger. Regret lived in his tone, so deep it seemed to cut the air itself. But regret was not enough, not yet. Amy's heart thrashed against her ribs, torn between the love that had never died and the betrayal she could not ignore. She thought of Lindy, the little girl who had asked about her father with wide, innocent eyes, and how Amy had struggled to explain loss in words too heavy for a child. How could she ever explain this? That the father she said was gone forever now stood alive before her. Belief came with risk, the risk of losing him again.